in some ways we have a fairly good healthcare system in the U.S. In terms of treating acute care. I mean, if you show up with a with a in a car accident or some kind of life threatening, we tend to have very good systems for that. Where we tend to fall short is trying to extrapolate the acute care into chronic care. And I think what's lacking severely is a focus on underlying causes. Um, I think our healthcare, at least here in the States and probably in most of the developing countries or developed countries, I should say, are focused more on single interventions, the blockbuster drug, where we're looking to kind of treat, one disease with one drug or maybe a small number of drugs and just hoping for good outcomes that way. What's missing, I think, is a focus on, like I said, the underlying cause. Whether it's socioeconomic causes, environmental causes, or just to focus on the biology, for example, biology of aging.
I'm in the United States. I just moved back from 3 years of living in Amsterdam, so I've got a bit of a contrast between those two systems there. One of the things that really comes across is that when we were in Amsterdam, healthcare for me and my family, being self-employed because I'm an entrepreneur by nature, it cost a few $1,000s. So we spent far more money on cheese and beer and wine than we did on healthcare. Um, so I started a company there because that wasn't the risks weren't all that great to be self-employed starting a company. I moved the company here back to the San Francisco Bay Area. Healthcare and again self-employed because I don't do the corporate world very well. And our healthcare for the three of us is $23,000 a year if we don't use anything.
Just like Sajjad noted, Scott, the sick care model of the system, how high cost it really is. When you really look at what's happened in the last 2 years, you see how much the sick care model upholds the macroeconomics of healthcare and the world. And this is why it's constantly being redesigned into the model, because of it creates a lot of wealth in certain areas of the world.
I'll add a bit the European perspective here coming from Berlin. Right, I would say similar to you, Denisa, who referred to what's happening before the pandemic and during the pandemic. Right, if we look at Europe as a region before the pandemic, poor health cost Europe on average about 2.7 trillion US dollars or 15% of GDP per year. In lost economic opportunity and not even talking about of the suffering of citizens and families and caretakers, right? That's equivalent to about $5,000 per person in Europe. So if we look at what is actually causing this burden of poor health in Europe, right? And for the US, the numbers are very similar. Musculoskeletal disorders, right, particularly back pain, neck pain, etc., they account for about 24% of the total economic loss from poor health. Mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, they contribute another 18%. And then neurological disorders that are not that far away from it, like migraine, headache, etc., they account for 13%, right? And then if we look at that burden of poor health and we look at what can be done about it, right? Even if we would just take the interventions that are out there today.
Healthcare systems around the world are really struggling. They are unsustainable. I mean, 20% of GDP in the US, 15% in Europe, maybe, I don't know. It's a very big number. And there need to be a revolution, a real revolution in how healthcare are let's say, treating, diagnosing people. You don't want hospitalization. You want to send the therapies and diagnostics home. And you want to bring in solutions for early diagnostics, early prevention, so that you don't get to the stage that we are in. Now, if you talk about, for example, the devices in the US or other places around the world, spending per patient in the US or other parts of the world is almost double. but the device cost in the US is less than in the rest of the world. So there is something over there that needs to be studied. I don't know what it is. Another thing that is important for our field, like brain disorders, the burden is very high. In the US, it's about 700 billion euros of direct costs on healthcare systems. In Europe, it's around 300 billion euros. And the problem there is that we don't have solutions.